React, the oldest and most respected JavaScript framework. Hate it or love it, you will need to learn it if you want to get a job. React is by far the most popular JavaScript framework and has the biggest community of any framework. To get started, I highly don't recommend using the default CLI. Instead, it is better to use Vite. So now I'm in my desired folder of choice in my React 200 seconds folder. So what you want to do is that you want to open the terminal and you want to run npm create Vite at latest. So you're going to click on enter. It is not React exclusive. You can use for Svelte, React. So it's going to ask you some questions. So I'm just going to click on dot for my current directory. Package name, you can leave this as it is. As I said, it's not for React exclusively. So we're just going to click on React and we're going to click on JavaScript. Okay, now we have our file. So before we go into what this is in a moment, let's just clear. First of all, there's a package.json file that has dependencies that our application needs to run. Essentially, just files that our application needs to run. So we need to run npm install. Or we're just going to go npm install, and this is going to install a couple of dependencies. So now the dependencies have installed. So don't worry if it doesn't install on one try, you can always try again. And to know if it's properly installed, you will see a node modules folder and a package log.json. So let's quickly go through all the files in the directory. We have the vite-config file, which is just vite-config. You want to leave this as it is. Package.json file, we've looked at these dependencies. This one also has dependencies. So the index.html file is where everything is rendered out too. So make sure you take good notes of this ID root. We're going to see a reference to that later on. Git ignore is for when you're uploading to Git. This is for ASLint, which is just an extension for formatting your code and stuff like that. So this is root. So what it's doing is that saying React DOM.create root, get element by root. So that element here, it is rendering out to that element here, and it's passing our entire app to it. That is why the app component is the root component essentially, and the CSS files are essentially to help style a component. So now that we understand every single file, let's run this. So to run this, npm run dev. And we're going to see what exactly this gives us in the browser. And this is called a React component, by the way, and it ends in .jsx because this is JavaScript and HTML. It is a JavaScript and HTML file. Okay, so click, and we see our file right here. So what we just have to do is that we just have to just clear everything. Okay, we'll return an empty div. We just need to just clear everything, and we'll set everything to 0. So that counter application, we're going to build it right from scratch. So don't worry about the CSS. You can delete the app.css. CSS is pretty straightforward. If you want to use the CSS, just style at this index.css. Can target any component anywhere. We're going to remove this, and don't delete this one that says use state yet. So this is a JavaScript and HTML file, so that's why it's called JSX. So what we want to do is that we could render a h1 here and say count is 0. Save, and if we look at this in the browser, we can see it says count is 0. And the reason why that's like that is because of styles from here. So we can remove most of the styles here. So you see count is 0 there. So what we have to do, I said again, this is a JavaScript and XML file. We can make this variable dynamic. So you can see something like const count is equal to 0. And we could render out count with curly braces like this. And now when we change the value of count to 5, it will change as well. So this is pretty dynamic. But then again, we need to have one kind of button to manually change the count. So we're going to have a button. It's going to say update count. So this is how we do events in React. We do a big letter, sorry, a small letter O, then on whatever the event is. So on click, on mouse over, on whatever. So it's passing on click. Then this takes a function. So we can put in an anonymous function and say count to equal count plus 1. So if we click on update count, the count is not updating, but the count variable is changing. So this is why we use useState in React. Although it's changing, it is not causing a re-render. So instead, we're going to use a useState to make it to re-render so that React knows when to re-render this component. So to do that, we will array the structure this, and we'll have a set count function essentially. Then we set this to use state of 5. So nothing fancy here. It's just going to create a variable count and this function to update the count, and the initial value is going to be 0. Nothing fancy here. So well, instead of doing this long boilerplate, we can just say set count plus 1 or count plus plus. Now when we click on update count, it's properly updating because React knows when to update the component.